observation, removing the roadblock to scaling up. I know it's afternoon, we all have been to at least 2 sessions, if not 3. Many of you have started at 8 o'clock, so we hope to keep you awake and interested for the next 2 hours and learn something very important to probably most of us have, for our programs and projects. So before we start, first of all, this session is being developed under the leadership of Rainforest Alliance. My name is Giulia Carbone, and I don't work for Rainforest Alliance, but I work for IUCN. But as an all partner of Rainforest Alliance, IUCN is taking the role of facilitator. So I'll be your facilitator today and trying to organize a session that hopefully will respond to many of your questions and allow you to share your experience. So before we start with the presentation that will support the discussion we're going to have later, I would like to have a little map of the room and have an idea of why some of you are here. I'd like to take 4 or 5 contributions and just to have an understanding what is the driver that made you walk through that door at 2:30 today. There's a microphone. Anybody willing to volunteer to share why you came? Okay.
My name is Daniel Hayden from RARE, and I came to this presentation because we as an organization focus on driving local behavior change. So one of the people we're looking for is trying to find incentives for behavior change. So I thought this might be an interesting topic.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Merci. Moi, je m'appelle Amadou Makardiou. Je travaille pour UCN au Sénégal. Et je suis venu à cet atelier-là pour échanger sur l'accès au marché des produits de la conservation en vue de donner une matérialisation à l'économie.
Thank you. This reminds me that I forgot to mention one thing. This session has translation, so I don't know how you call these objects, are available if you want translation English, French, Spanish, and Korean, I think. So these are all over, and we're distributed all over. Please. So that means we have to speak in the microphone, otherwise they won't.
Yeah, my name is Archana Bogore. I'm from India, and we are also trying to engage businesses in biodiversity conservation and sustainable management. And I think we are facing a lot of roadblocks basically to do something for biodiversity by businesses. So I am eager to listen that how some people have already achieved that and now taking it to the scaling up level, and that's what brought me here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yeah?
Can I just shout?
Thank you.
Thank you. I work for a bank, and I think my perspective on this would be interesting to hear about ways that the private sector can support biodiversity conservation besides philanthropy. So how do the markets come into this? How can we tap into retail bank, maybe it's for ordinary person on the streets interests and so on? So any perspectives on that from the audience would be a lot of interest.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, well, I hope we are pretty much, I think, on the same line, and the idea is really to understand how we can scale up. And, we're talking about roadblocks, and it's not that we want to be negative. I think the message is, let's try to remove these roadblocks. Let's have a discussion around what are the mechanisms and the solutions for scaling up. The program for today is organized that we're going to have a number of short presentations by the partners that have helped design this agenda. And they will explain, they will give you a story, they will tell you from their perspective, based on their experiences, what have been the roadblocks and what have been the solutions. And then we're going to have an interactive discussion with you, and we'll probably come to the floor and just have reflections on what are your experiences and what have you been, in questions and even more questions to the speakers. So I would leave it to that, but before we start with the real first keynote presentation by Rainforest Alliance, I'd like to present Flora Somerville, Program Manager, Business and Biodiversity for Flora International, who will give you a little bit of an overview of what of results of a survey we have taken in the past 2 months.
Can you load the presentation? They're not all there.
As Julia said, I'm Marissa Mcgall from Amplify. And to help inform discussions in today's workshop, we thought it would be interesting to survey a targeted pool of practitioners, including IUCN members, to see what they thought the roadblocks were. So I'm here to briefly present the questions we asked. Speak to the mic. Yeah, thanks. Just realised. I'm here to briefly present the questions we asked and the results of that survey, and hope that this will stimulate the discussion and encourage your contributions after the case studies we're going to hear. So what did we ask? This one slide. The first question that we asked was, to what degree do each of the following factors limit the scaling up of sustainable management of biodiversity in business? This was a multiple choice question and covered a range of topics from business knowledge, conflicting policies and consumer awareness. The second questions 2 and 3 were around solutions. We first wanted to know what the single solution was that people thought had the greatest impact, and then what other solutions they could recommend. We left questions 2 and 3 as free text because we wanted to gather as many ideas as possible. So we also asked people to tell us which sector they were from. As you can see, we were aiming for between about 30 and 50 responses and received 46 responses. And of that, nearly 40% of our responses were from the business sector, and nearly 30% were from NGO, and nearly 7% from academia. The one group that we were slightly disappointed with the rate of response was government organisations, and we just received 2 responses from that, which actually made analysis across the sector really less informative and less meaningful. This graph shows the average for the presented limiting factors for scaling up. They had 12 factors to choose from, and they had to select whether they thought they were either no limitation or a major limitation. I realise you can't read the 12 factors and you're not intended to, but just the point I wanted to make here was the clustering that came through of the potential barriers. So with all the barriers we suggested, none of the suggested barriers were considered to be less than a minor or moderate limitation, and no one factor was actually came through on average to be no limit whatsoever. So what were the major factors that came through for scaling up? The point we wanted to identify was which factor was consistently considered to be a major roadblock for scaling up of biodiversity management by a business. The view that sustainable management of biodiversity is unlikely to bring business benefits was selected as a major limiting factor by 70% of participants. Other factors that frequently came up were government policies don't encourage sustainable biodiversity management. 52% of respondents said that was a major factor, and also a lack of value to ecosystem services was selected by 50% as a major factor. We also wanted to know if there were any other barriers we've missed from the 12 factors that we gave people. And these quotes, in their own words, just give you, just represent the responses that came through. So one that was mentioned quite a few times was plain English is needed. Language is a real factor that is blocking understanding. The word biodiversity in itself, the phrase ecosystem services, isn't clear, and there was a big request for can we please come up with plain English. People fear change was one that came through a few times as well. Anything where you're asking for a change in behaviour is suspicious. And another point that came through was that politicians and governments just have a lack of sense of urgency on this issue, and that inherently governments are only going to put in place policies that will get them re-elected, and the nature of this means that biodiversity in this barrier frequently gets overlooked. One point that was suggested just by one of our respondents, but I thought was very important to the discussions today, was that they felt that there was a shortage of existing accreditation schemes that cover the products they buy, which is maybe counter to what we're generally led to believe. And there was a clear group of response around lack of pressure from investors in the finance sector, and that we really need to get the finance sector better aware and better engaged on this issue to put pressure on business to behave. And then another group was around absence of senior management and no inspiration from the top. So the second question we asked was, what single solution do people think would have the greatest impact to enable scaling up? I grouped the answers that came through into categories that fell out of those responses. Very few people started giving us a single solution, which was kind of as we expected. And where people mentioned one or two things, we captured those as a separate solution. So this is just a word cloud that shows the number of different times that categories of solutions were suggested. And from it you can see that by far and away the single solution that was presented was government action and educating business and educating the public. So this pie chart shows the categorization of suggested solutions and actually combines the responses from 2 and 3 because there was no noticeable trend coming through in the difference between the single solution and the other one, so we actually combined them into this chart to make it easier for you to see. The only point where there was a difference, where I just wanted to point out, was that 7% that you can see for positive examples. That all came through in the single solution responses. I don't know if you can necessarily draw anything from it, but I just think it's an interesting point to make. And that was a call for more case studies and examples on how we can remove roadblocks. So I think the main topic that came through in the solutions was that when you combine educating consumers and the public, educating a business, government actions and tools, this makes up 3/4 of the suggested solutions. And again, just in their own words, these quotes cover some of the responses that came through. So people were, there was a whole list of solutions around legislation, calling for stronger legislation, improved enforcement of existing legislation, and reflecting the barriers. There was also a call that we need to understand the value of ecosystem services and to correct that. There were also some more radical responses to these solutions, which I found quite interesting, and these also came from business, not just the NGOs. And this included compulsory labelling systems. What also came through was a progressive tax for biodiversity, impact tax. It's the only survey I've seen in a recession where people are calling for more taxation. It was quite a large block of responses. And ending perverse subsidies was another point that came through. And a final one that I just wanted to leave up that we had from a few of the agricultural companies was that they were really calling for government action for better land use allocation. So where they go to the effort of identifying areas of high conservation value, they then need supportive policies in place to carry through that process. So I'd just like to thank everyone who took the time to respond and to help out with the analysis and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Flora. I would like to invite Mohammed Rafiq, Senior Vice President for Programs, Rainforest Alliance, to give us his keynote presentation.
Thank you, Julia, and I hope I can manage with 2 computers. Let me begin by thanking every one of you very much for making your time and being available for this discussion. And I do hope that at the end of these 1.5 hours, you will find it worthwhile for your time being with us. I start with a little apology that some of the first few slides that you will see, I showed them in another session this morning, but that is coming from that I don't want to presume that you know who I am and who I work for, where we come from. Apology to those who have seen it, but to the others, I hope they will be able to put this presentation in perspective. By my own background, I'm a forester by training, worked 15 years in the public sector, forestry, another 15 years in IUCN, last 7 years in engaging business for conservation in IUCN, and then I moved on, and my last 4 years have been in Rainforest Alliance, where I work as somebody responsible for the overall content of what we do in the organization. Rainforest Alliance works to conserve biodiversity and ensure sustainable livelihoods by transforming land use practices, business practices, and consumer behavior. Our approach to conservation is essentially a value chain approach in which we start working with producer, providing them technical assistance, lifting them and their capacities to a level where they can manage their production system sustainably, giving them an opportunity and choice to be certified if they so wish. We don't require it, but if they wish, we do help them, and we provide the link to the global market so that producers have access to the market and market has the supply of sustainably sourced products. As I speak, we are 25 years old as an organization, and we have come a long way in these 25 years. In this chart, you see